Before we get into the details of growing crops sustainably, it is a good idea to get an overview of some of these crop species. This will be an introduction to two of our main Indiana crops, corn and soybeans. Corn, which is known by the scientific name of Zea maize, is native to Mexico and Central America and was developed over centuries by human selection, beginning with the wild-type progenitor Teosinte. Corn is a grass. It's definitely not a turf-type grass, but a grass nonetheless. The leaves are blade-like, and like other grasses, it is pollinated by wind, meaning that it does not require insects to aid in pollination. The male reproductive parts, or stamens, and the female reproductive parts, the pistils, are located on the same plant, but in separate flowers. The male flower is the tassel located at the top of the plant. The female flower is what will become the ear. The silks are long, sticky, thread-like fibers that extend from the ovaries, which will become kernels, to beyond the tip of the husk. Pollen from the tassel falls or is carried by wind. Most pollen grains land on the corn leaf blade or on the ground and do nothing. A very small percentage land on receptive silks. When a grain pollen lands on a receptive silk, it sticks to it and sends a tubule into the silk, which grows and extends the entire length of the silk until it reaches an ovary, thus finishing the pollination process. The fact that the male and female reproductive parts are located in separate flowers aids in the production of hybrid seed corn. Hybrid seed corn became the industry standard beginning in the 1940s, and today, nearly all yellow, white, and popcorn grown in the U.S. is hybrid corn. A typical field of seed corn is laid out as 4 rows of seed parent and 1 row of pollen parent. Both the seed and pollen parents are inbred lines that have been produced by self-pollinating for numerous generations, so that each chromosome pair is homozygous at every gene location. If any of you have ever had the pleasure of detasseling seed corn in the summer, what you are doing was removing the tassels from the seed parents so that those plants were not allowed to self-pollinate. In order to produce a hybrid seed, the female or seed parent needs to be pollinated by a plant in the male or pollinator row. The end result is that 2 plants that differ greatly in genetic makeup are crossed to produce hybrid seed that, when planted, will result in a field of very uniform and vigorous corn plants. Approximately 44% of corn grown in the U.S. is used for livestock feed. About 30% is used to produce ethanol, 15% is exported to other countries, and most of the remainder is used for products such as sweeteners, cooking oils, and other food ingredients. Soybeans, known by the scientific name of Glycine max. Soybeans are native to East Asia and are known to have been cultivated in China as early as 8,000 to 9,000 years ago. From the time I first learned soybeans' scientific name Glycine max, I mistakenly assumed it was in some way a reference to the amino acid glycine. Like perhaps soybeans must be very high in glycine content. This is not the case. Glycine is the Latinized version of the Greek word glycos, which means sweet. Carl Linnaeus, who developed the system for naming and classifying all life on Earth, found the soybean taproot to be unusually sweet when compared to other plants of the same genus, so he named it Glycine max. Soybeans are a legume, which means that they form a symbiotic relationship with soil bacteria that allows them to fix atmospheric nitrogen into a usable form and then utilize that nitrogen for various plant functions. The flowers of soybeans are perfect, which is a botanical term that means the stamen and pistil are located in the same flower. Pollination is often triggered by an insect landing on the flower, but insects are not a requirement for soybean pollination. In the absence of insect pollinators, the petals surrounding the stamens will eventually open up and trigger the stamens to release their pollen onto the pistils. Flowering in soybeans is day length sensitive, or to be more precise, night length sensitive. The plant waits for summer solstice, on or about June 21st, and then as the nights begin getting longer, there is a certain night length that, when reached, triggers flowering. Some soybean varieties are determinate, meaning that nodes stop growing once flowering is initiated. Other varieties are indeterminate, meaning that these plants can continue adding nodes even after flowering has begun. These indeterminate varieties are by far the most widely planted in this area of the United States. Prior to 1920, soybeans were grown as a forage crop. In other words, the soybeans were grazed by livestock or made into hay. The grain, or the seeds, were not economically important. Soybeans would later play an important role in reclaiming farmland that had fallen into a degraded state during the Dust Bowl era. This was largely due to the soybean's ability to fix nitrogen and its ability to help regenerate soils when grown in rotation. Why are soybeans important today? A typical soybean consists of about 80% protein-rich soybean meal. 97% of this soybean meal is used in animal feed, and in fact is the most important protein source for animal feeds. The remaining 3% is used for food products such as tofu, soy burgers, and soy milk. Before a soybean can be consumed by a human, it needs to be cooked with wet heat in order to destroy the trypsin inhibitors. While raw soybeans are not highly toxic, they will give you a stomachache. Soybeans are an excellent source of protein and fiber and are very high in iron, manganese, phosphorus, and several of the B vitamins. The other major component of a soybean is oil. About 20% of a soybean seed is oil. About 68% of this oil is used in food products such as cooking oil, margarine, and baked goods. Another 25% of the oil is used in biofuels, while the remainder goes to a number of industrial uses such as inks, adhesives, candles, and crayons. So now we have discussed the basics of corn and soybeans and why they are important crops. Hopefully this can serve as useful information to help you learn more about producing these and other crops in a sustainable manner.